In a small town, a 6-year-old black girl, abandoned by her mother, wandered the streets in silence, as if invisible. On a freezing night, she found a man collapsed in a dark alley. She ran to a nearby pharmacy and tugged on the clerk's skirt, begging for help, but was pushed away. Desperate, she offered her only dollar bill to plead for an ambulance call. She had no idea the man was a billionaire, and that the next day, her life would change forever. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. It was just past 5 in the afternoon, and the sun hung low over the faded rooftops of a forgotten southern town. The air smelled faintly of grease and dust, and the streets echoed with the same silence that had settled over the lives of those who had learned not to ask questions. That was when people first noticed her, but not really. They saw the shape of her, the outline of her small frame drifting past the laundromat, the gas station, and the old Baptist church with peeling paint. But they didn't see her. Her name was Nia. She was 6 years old, barely 40 pounds, with tight black curls that had long since lost any pattern under weeks of dust and rain. Her skin was dry and scratched, especially around her knees and elbows, and she walked with a slight hunch, as if always bracing for someone to yell at her for being somewhere she shouldn't be. Nia didn't talk. Not to strangers, not to adults, not even to the kids who sometimes played near the corner store. People said she was mute. Some even said she was cursed. But nobody knew her story, because nobody had ever asked. She carried a bag made from an old pillowcase, tied around her shoulder with frayed rope. It bounced softly against her hip with every step she took, like a quiet reminder of everything she had managed to hold on to. Inside were a few broken toys, a plastic spoon, and a single $100 bill, folded so carefully it still looked almost new. That money had come from Father Joseph, the church's old priest, who gave it to her just weeks before he died. He told her to keep it safe for something important. She had no idea what that meant, but she had held on to it like it was a piece of his soul. The town knew her. People whispered about her when she passed. "That's the mute girl. Her mama ran off. She always shows up at the food drives." But no one reached out. Some tossed her scraps when they felt generous. Others told her to move along. To most, she was just another shadow. That evening, Nia stood near the side of the old bakery, watching the closed sign flicker under the porch light. She hadn't eaten since morning, just a piece of stale bread someone had left by the church steps. Her stomach cramped in waves, but she didn't cry. She had learned not to. Crying got you nothing. She looked across the street and saw the alley behind the pharmacy. It was narrow and dark, but it was dry, and that was enough. She turned slowly, pulled the strap of her pillowcase tighter across her shoulder, and made her way to the alley. That's when she saw him. At first, she thought it was just a pile of old clothes. A homeless man, maybe. But as she stepped closer, the shape groaned. She froze, her heart beating faster, her hands clenching around the edge of her bag. The man was lying on his side, face pale, mouth half open. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper, broken and low, "Help, please." Nia didn't move. She had seen people pass out before: hunger, drugs, exhaustion. They usually got back up. But this one was different. His hand gripped his chest, his legs stiffened, and his face contorted like he was in terrible pain. She took one small step closer. The man's eyes fluttered. His skin looked waxy. He wasn't dirty like the others. His clothes were old, but not torn. His shoes looked expensive, though scuffed now, like they hadn't seen a polish in weeks. She thought of the kids at the train station. Sometimes they would pass out from not eating. Sometimes they woke up. Sometimes they didn't. She crouched beside him and opened her bag. From inside, she pulled the last thing she had from that morning, a chunk of bread, no bigger than her palm. She held it out with both hands. He didn't take it. His lips moved, but there were no words. His fingers shook violently as he gasped for air. Her heart thumped so loud in her ears she thought it would explode. She had no phone, no one she could call, no idea what to do, except she turned and ran, crossed the alley, past the broken fence, to the glowing sign of the pharmacy at the corner. She burst through the door and grabbed the hem of the woman behind the counter. The woman turned sharply. "Hey, don't touch me." Nia stepped back, her breathing ragged, lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out. "What do you want, huh? You can't be in here. Get out." Nia reached into her bag. Her hands shook. She pulled out the $100 bill. The woman's eyes widened. Her tone shifted instantly. "Where'd you get that?" Still, Nia didn't speak. She just held the bill higher. The woman snatched it. "Is there someone hurt?" she asked, almost annoyed. Nia nodded once, quick and desperate. The woman sighed, rolled her eyes, and pulled out her cell phone. "Fine. I'll call. But don't think I'm doing this for you." Nia didn't wait. As the woman spoke to the dispatcher, Nia turned and ran back into the alley. But she didn't go to the man. She crawled behind the dumpsters where no one could see her. She watched the flashing lights come. Watched them lift him onto a stretcher. Watched them drive away. Then finally, when the street was empty again, she curled into herself and tried to sleep. The first light of morning crept through the clouds like it was unsure if it should be there. In the alley, everything was still, damp, cold, quiet. Nia didn't sleep that night. She had curled up behind the dumpster, hugging her pillowcase bag tight to her chest. Her eyes stayed open long after the ambulance left, even after the siren had faded, even after the woman at the pharmacy turned off her lights and locked the door. Nia stayed hidden, because hiding was safe. Hiding meant no one could yell at her, take her things, or send her somewhere she didn't want to go. Now she sat with her back against the brick wall, legs drawn in, her thin shirt damp from the ground. Her fingers dug into the pillowcase fabric, reaching for comfort. The $100 bill was gone. And so was the man. She didn't know if he was alive. She only knew she had tried. That had to count for something. Across town, in a hospital room with machines quietly blinking, Charles Whitmore opened his eyes. The pain in his chest was dull now, like a fading echo. But it was the confusion that hit him first, the antiseptic smell, the too white ceiling, the faint beeping of a monitor. A nurse leaned over him, adjusting an IV. "You're lucky," she said. Someone called it in just in time. His throat was dry. "Who?" "Didn't leave a name," the nurse said. "Dispatcher said it came from a pharmacy on Maple and 3rd. Charles closed his eyes again, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was something heavier. He had walked out into that night to be alone with his grief, to return to the place where he had once lived in a one-bedroom apartment with his wife and son, before the money, before the crash. He hadn't expected to make it back. But someone had stopped. Someone had cared. He turned his head slowly. "I need a phone." Later that morning, Charles stood outside the small corner pharmacy, still wearing the hospital's loose gray sweater under his coat. His assistant Jeremy hovered beside him, concerned but silent. The pharmacy door jingled as he entered. The same woman from the night before was behind the counter, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, mildly annoyed. "We don't open for another 20 minutes. Charles took a step closer. "Did you call for an ambulance last night?" She blinked, then tilted her head. "Oh, you're the guy. I was found in the alley. Someone called emergency services using your phone." The woman set her phone down. "Yeah, that wasn't me," she said quickly. "Some dirty little girl came in, grabbed my skirt. I only called 'cause she gave me $100. Charles didn't respond right away. He just stared at her. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Where did she go? The woman shrugged. Back into the alley, I guess. I didn't follow her. You people think I've got time to babysit every homeless kid who walks in here? Jeremy stepped forward. Do you have security cameras? The woman hesitated. Why? Charles said softly. Because I need to see her face. 15 minutes later, in the back office of the pharmacy, they watched the footage. It was grainy but clear enough. A small figure ran into frame, barefoot, wild hair, clutching something in her hand. She reached up, handed the bill, and stood there shaking. When the woman turned to make the call, the girl slipped away. Charles leaned in, studying her face. Pause it. The image froze. Her eyes were wide, not empty, just afraid. And underneath that fear, something else. Bravery, he whispered. She saved my life. Jeremy glanced at him. What do you want to do? Charles stood up, slow and steady. I want to find her. Outside, the clouds had thickened, and a light drizzle was starting to fall. Charles got back into the SUV, holding a still frame of the video on his phone. Start with a shelter. Then the food bank. Anywhere children might go. She's not invisible to me anymore. He didn't know her name. He didn't know if she could speak. But he remembered that look, that moment she had reached out not for herself, but for him. She had nothing, and still she gave. Now it was his turn. The rain fell harder by noon, turning the sidewalk slick and washing the dirt into thin gray rivers along the gutter. Charles sat in the back of the SUV, one hand pressed against his chest, not from pain, but from something deeper, heavier. He hadn't felt this kind of pull in years, not in boardrooms, not at fundraisers, not even when he signed the papers to give away half his fortune. None of it had made him feel anything. But that little girl who stood there trembling, who handed over her only treasure just to save someone she didn't know, she had cracked something open in him. Something that had been sealed shut since the day his wife and son died. Still nothing from the shelter, Jeremy said from the front seat. And the school district has no record of a child matching her description. Charles didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the street, watching every corner, every alley as if she might suddenly appear. 2 blocks later, they passed the community church. A line had already formed near the rear parking lot, people waiting for food. The town didn't have much, but on Thursdays a charity group handed out bread and canned goods. That's where he told the driver to stop. He stepped out slowly, ignoring the umbrella Jeremy held out. His coat absorbed the rain quickly, but he didn't care. He scanned the line person by person. Most were adults. A few mothers with children. And then, near the end of the line, half-shielded behind an older boy, he saw her. She was smaller than he remembered. Her clothes looked heavier now, someone had likely given her an old coat that swallowed her frame. But her eyes were the same, quiet, watchful, worn. She held her pillowcase bag close, fingers digging into the fabric like it might float away if she loosened her grip. Charles didn't move right away. He watched as the line inched forward. She didn't push. She didn't complain. Just waited. When she finally reached the table, the volunteer asked something. She didn't answer. He asked again, louder. She held up her hand slowly, as if trying to explain without words. The man frowned. Then he shook his head and pointed to a clipboard. No name, no bag, he said. We can't just give things out. She looked down. Charles stepped forward just as she was turning away. Her face was blank, not surprised, not angry, just used to it. Wait, he said. She froze. The volunteer raised an eyebrow. You know her? Charles nodded. Yes. She's with me. The man shrugged and handed over a small paper bag. Next. The girl took the bag with both hands but didn't look up. She stepped aside slowly, unsure if she should run or stay. Charles knelt down, ignoring the sting in his knees and the cold rain on his back. "You saved me," he said quietly. "I remember you. I remember what you did." She clutched the bag tighter. He took a deep breath. "I want to repay you. Not with money, not with gifts, but with something real. A home. A place where you never have to beg again." She didn't answer. She didn't nod. But her eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time, they didn't flinch. Charles extended his hand. "I won't hurt you. I won't let anyone else hurt you either." There was a long pause, the kind that made your heart beat loud enough to hear. Then slowly, Nia reached out. Not to shake his hand. Not to take anything. She touched his sleeve, just a finger, just enough to say, "I'm listening." That was all he needed. The house was quiet when they arrived. Not the kind of silence that made you feel small or unwanted, but the kind that wrapped itself around you, soft and slow, like a warm blanket at the end of a long storm. It sat at the edge of town, hidden behind a line of tall oak trees, with windows that glowed golden against the fading gray sky. Nia didn't say a word when she stepped out of the car. She didn't look afraid, just cautious, like a stray animal unsure if the door would close behind her the moment she crossed the threshold. Charles didn't rush her. He walked ahead a few steps, then stopped and waited. His gait was slower than usual, still recovering, but steady. "It's your choice," he said over his shoulder. "No one's going to make you stay." She hesitated. Her pillowcase bag was slung tight across her shoulder, damp at the corners from the rain. The paper bag of food she had been given was held firmly in her hands, untouched. She looked at the house, then at him, then she walked. Inside, everything smelled faintly of wood and soap. The floor creaked beneath her small steps. She passed a hallway of framed photos, some faded, some newer. A woman with soft eyes. A boy holding a baseball glove. Charles didn't point them out. He just showed her the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom with the light that flickered when you turned it on too fast. Then he opened the door to a small room at the end of the hall. "This one's yours if you want it," he said. There was a bed. Not a mattress on the floor. Not a blanket on concrete. A real bed. A shelf with a lamp. A small dresser. A window with blue curtains. On the pillow sat a stuffed bear, brown, with one ear slightly bent. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, but it was hers. Nia stepped inside slowly. She didn't touch anything, not at first. She just looked. Then she placed her pillowcase bag gently at the foot of the bed, sat down, and folded her hands in her lap. Charles stood in the doorway for a moment, then cleared his throat. "I'll give you some time. There's soup on the stove if you're hungry." She didn't move. That night, she ate in silence. Charles didn't push her. He sat across the table, sipping tea, telling her small stories, about the house, about the trees out back, about how the heater always groaned once at midnight and then stayed quiet till morning. She didn't respond, but her eyes followed every word. She wasn't just hearing, she was remembering. Days passed. She stayed. She never spoke. Not a sound. But she began to move through the house with less fear. She'd sit on the porch in the mornings, curled up in one of the old rocking chairs. She'd eat what he cooked, even if she never asked for anything. She started brushing her hair again, slowly, methodically, like she was trying to untangle more than just knots. Charles learned her rhythms. He didn't ask her why she never spoke. He didn't ask about her mother, or where she had slept before. He just made sure the fridge was full, that her light switch worked, and that her sheets were warm and clean. One evening, after dinner, she walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a worn children's book. She didn't open it, just looked at the cover for a long time, then handed it to him. "You want me to read it?" he asked. She nodded. He sat down on the couch, cleared his throat, and began. Her head leaned against the armrest. Her eyes slowly began to close. By the third page, she was asleep. He didn't stop reading. When he reached the last line, he whispered, "Good night, kiddo," and sat there a little longer, holding the book in his lap. It was the first time the house had felt alive in years. The wind had changed by morning. It was warmer now, gentler, brushing through the open windows and carrying the scent of early spring. Damp soil. Fresh grass. Something hopeful. Birds chirped near the porch, and somewhere out back, a squirrel skittered across the fence. Inside the house, Nia sat at the small table by the kitchen window, legs tucked underneath her, spoon clinking quietly against a bowl of oatmeal. She had started eating breakfast without being asked. She had come to the table when the smell of toast or eggs filled the house, never making a sound, but always there like a quiet promise that she wasn't going to leave. Charles sat across from her with the newspaper folded but unread. He watched her from over the rim of his coffee mug, noticing the small changes. She had let him wash her coat last week. She wore a clean sweater today, a soft yellow one that used to belong to his late wife. She had found it in the hall closet and hugged it to her chest like it had always been hers. The morning was like any other, until the phone rang. Charles stood to answer it. Whitmore Residence. It was the attorney, some follow-up paperwork for the trust he had set up in Nia's name. He spoke briefly, calmly, but as he turned back toward the table, his knee gave out slightly. The pain shot through his lower back, sharp and familiar. He winced, placing a hand on the wall for balance. The mug slipped from his hand and shattered against the tile. Nia jumped to her feet. Her bowl clattered against the floor, oatmeal splashing across her bare toes. She looked at him, really looked. And in that moment, something in her cracked wide open. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Charles froze. His heart thudded so hard it echoed in his ears. She had spoken. Her voice was small, rasped with rust like a door that hadn't opened in years, but it was clear. He stared at her, not in disbelief but in awe. She stepped toward him, arms half raised, unsure, hesitant. "You need help?" He nodded slowly. Just a little ache. Nothing to worry about." She reached for his arm. Her touch was light, careful, but full of intent. Together they walked to the couch. He sat down, exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Nia stood in front of him, silent again. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. She looked down, then up, her lips parting. "Are you really my dad now?" she asked softly. His throat tightened. "Only if you want me to be." She nodded, once, then twice. Her voice shook, this time not from fear, but from something bigger. "Okay. Dad." The word hung in the air, warm and fragile and heavier than anything he had ever been given. Charles couldn't speak. His eyes filled before he could stop them, and he reached for her, pulling her into his arms. She came willingly, folding into his chest like she had always belonged there. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. Inside, two hearts beat quietly in the same rhythm, for the first time in a long, long while not alone, and neither of them ever was again.